بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, everyone. This is Muhammad Al-Yami. I'm the director of the Development Effectiveness Department at the Islamic Corporation for the Development of Private Sector, at the private sector arm of the Islamic Development Bank Group. Today's session is the role of the private sector entities in undertaking evaluation of their impact. As you all aware, almost all the MDBs and DFIs are working on assessing and evaluating their development impact created as a result of their interventions. In many of these interventions, the private sector is a key player or actually the beneficiary of such interventions. When it comes to how or who will assess the impact of these interventions, experts would say that we still have a long way to go, especially for the private sector. Part of that is due to the fact that most of the evaluation is usually done by the multilateral MDBs and DFIs and not by the private sector itself. In this session, we bring some of the well-known experts in the field to discuss this subject and take away some recommendations, lessons, and examples of how to improve the private sector practice of evaluating their own impact. It is with a great pleasure to welcome our panelists today. Johan Kloof is head of the evaluation unit at the KfW Development Bank. Nathan Subramaniam is the director, independent evaluation sector and private division in the at the independent evaluation at Asian Development Bank. Ahmad Shukri is the chief risk officer of Bank Rakyat Malaysia Berhad. We also have Isa Fay, the director of the sector economics and development impact department at IFC, and also we have Ibrahima, the senior business oversight and delivery monitoring specialists at the Office of the President, Islamic Development Bank Group. I would like to welcome all panelists, all audience, and I would like to give the floor for each panelist to introduce himself in a minute or minute and a half. I would like to call Dr. Johan, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Mohammed, for the introduction, and thank you a lot for the invitation to be part of this panel today. It's a pleasure to be here and to discuss the topic. I'm head of evaluation at KfW Development Bank in Germany. I'm still relatively new on the job. I've been doing this for almost a year now, after almost 20 years in academia. Well, I continue to be professor of economics at Humboldt University Berlin, but after, well, a long, in a way, career of impact evaluations in developing countries, I've moved more into practice, and I'll try to report a bit on our experiences in the session today. And I'm very curious to hear the experiences of my esteemed colleagues on the panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Ahmad Shukri, please.
Okay, thank you, Mohammed. My name is Ahmad Shukri Rahman, Chief Risk Officer of Bank Rakyat. Bank Rakyat is a Islamic cooperative bank that also been classified as a development financial institution by the Central Bank of Malaysia. Our mandate and focus from the government is to help the cooperative organization in Malaysia and also to grow the small and medium-sized businesses in Malaysia. So we are fully funded by our shareholders to help provide financings activities to this cooperative and SME and work together with them to grow beyond what from scratch from the startup until they reach a level of maybe they can be listed. That's our goal in the long run. And from the risk management side, we incorporating one of the aspects to ensure that when we do risk management assessment, it covers the expectation of achieving our objective, not only from the normal risk management perspective. Thank you, Ahmad.
Thank you very much. Mr. Matan?
Thank you, Mohammed, for inviting me to this panel. It's a great opportunity. I am Nathan Subramaniam. I work at the Asian Development Bank. I'm working in the Independent Evaluations Department in the bank. I'm director of all the infrastructure sectors. So I cover evaluation in all the infrastructure sectors and the private sector. This includes energy, transport, water, urban, agriculture, natural resources, finance, and all of private sector. I've been in ADB for the last 12 years. And in ADB, I have an experience of working on the operational side and then also on the evaluation side now. Prior to ADB, I have experience in terms of working in banks, in the debt capital markets area, and in the transport sector. Back to you. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Dr. Isa Faye?
Thank you, Mohammed, for having me and for putting together such a very important topic today. I'm very glad to be here with my co-panelists this morning. As you know, my name is Isa Faye. I'm from the IFC. As you know, we have been in IFC trying over the last 3 years to really revamp and refocus our development impact toolkit. We have been putting together a lot of systems and mechanisms into place to make sure that we really strengthen our focus, our ability to identify, select, screen, and also appraise impact. So as you know, the M system has been put in place, and I'm going to talk later a little bit about that and then share some ideas. But before that, I was also the manager for the development impact department and the research department at the African Development Bank, where I was doing economics like Johan. I've never left the economics, so it's always doing economics and impact assessment. And I'm continuing actually in IFC to do that. I think that this goes together. You cannot do it without the other one. And I think that it has helped us really strengthen the rigor in our analysis. And then what I hear more and more about our board and others is that the analytical rigor that we have brought into the IFC assessment of development impact by doing more economic analysis is really very, very useful. And prior to that, I was at the World Bank side, the other side of the World Bank as an economist. And before that, I was teaching economics in France. So back to you, Mohammed.
Thank you very much. Now, Ibrahima, please take the minute and also proceed with your main presentation of the session.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rayami. Thank you so much, all the other panelists and the attendees. I'm very honored to be here today to share some of our experience. In ICD, I joined ICD, which is the private sector arm of IDB. Recently moved to the main bank, the ISDB, at the office of the president, helping really to mainstream more evidence policies and programs using our evaluation background. So today I'm going to share, this past 6 experience. We have this journey together with, our other colleagues in the DFI community. Isa Faye is here. Nathan, Johan, Ahmad, Shukri. I visited them last year to explore more this VBI approach. Prior to the Islamic Development Bank, I was working at UNICEF, the regional office in Dakar, covering 24 country offices. I was in charge of the knowledge management and I was also the result focal point at the UNICEF regional office. So I think we can move now to the presentation.
Would you please speak louder, Ibrahima?
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So the presentation, as you can see, the topic today is the role of the private sector in okay, because I lost the main screen. It's coming back, yes. So this is the the topic is the role of the private sector entities in evaluating their impact. I will be talking on behalf of the Islamic Development Bank, which is covering 57 member countries, as well as the Independent Evaluation Department, and then the ICD, which is the private sector arm of the group. Today, I'm going to share some of our experience, how we were able to share our role between, as a DFI and our client companies using the impact investing framework. Next, please. When I was preparing this session, I remember this story. It happens 4 years ago. I visited Pran RFL in Bangladesh. It's the largest industrial group in Bangladesh. They have 29 entities, 100,000 employees. Basically, it's more than the half of the total public servants in my home country, the Senegal, just to show you how they can be impactful. So when I was welcome in this conference room, the first day of my mission to present the evaluation mission agenda, maybe Nathan and Johan may talk later on how we can use, what is the methodology we are using, what are the metrics we are using for private sector operation evaluation. When I saw the mission on the wall, if you make the zoom, you can see they had an ambition to generate employment, earn dignity and self-respect for their compatriots through profitable enterprises. You have here the two main pillars of impact investing, which is the impact part and the return part. Now, what was missing, my main mission was really the evaluation of one operation we had with them, which is the establishment of a new production line of bicycles using the ECG good practice standards. But I was trying to see beyond my mission objective, how could I help them translate this very nice mission statement to a theory of change and having an SDG narrative, because today we cannot do anything without seeing the alignment with the SDGs. So at the end of the mission, we were able to deliver on that, on our objective of the mission, but also helping them translate this to a theory of change. They were so happy when they visited us 2 months later in our HQ. They made a presentation to our management, including these findings. So from us as the evaluation department, this was a good inspiration to start our new journey that I will try to explain in this presentation. Next. So for this presentation, we are going to discuss, myself, but also the other panelists, because I will just do a big introduction, and I expect from the research panel to answer or to address some of our challenges we are all facing. So I will first discuss the main challenges we are facing as DFI, because we are involved in the DFI community. We have our annual meeting, we share almost the same challenges. Second, I will present some of the opportunities we now can really support this idea of developing company-led M&A system. And finally, I will share some of the early lessons from the practical examples we have so far. Next. How this thing is linked to the annual evaluation week. It's for a better future, evaluation for a better future for all. For us, if we are able to push this impact investment movement, we can really link these two. Next. For the first point of my presentation, I will discuss some of the challenges as well as the opportunities. Next. If we follow the monitoring evaluation cycle, we can see from the ex ante, usually we have this big issue of having baseline data, especially because we are doing a lot of projects in the financial sector, supporting banks, providing line of finance. When we do due diligence, usually we do it at the high level, at the bank level. We don't have more insights at the final beneficiaries level at ex ante moment. So this is a big issue we face. So at ex post, it's not very easy to compare, I mean, the difference you are making. At the annual review, also, we have the issue of completeness. One example, when we were starting our journey, we tried to launch our annual survey. The first survey, we were able to get 54% response rate, but we were able to really increase this year after year. Now we reach 90, almost 90%, but till we face the issue with the reliability of data. In 1 year, one of our clients said they had 100,000 jobs. When we check again, they say it was 1,000. It was a mistake between 1,000 to 100,000. So these are some issues we may face in the field. When we conduct ex post evaluation also, we cannot do it for the whole portfolio. We have to take a sample. Sometimes it's not representative. We have also an issue of attribution versus contribution. If IFC, ISDB, Islamic Development Bank, KfW, they finance the same project, how are we going to disaggregate the impact of each organization? I raised this issue also during our debate on the impact principles led by IFC in our meeting last year in Amsterdam. The idea was, shall we talk about the impact of the project or the impact of the organization? Because the impact of the project, yes, we can really have very credible figures, but when it comes to the impact of the organization, there is an issue of attribution. You cannot just prorate the impact based on the financing share of its financiers, so it does not make sense. In the SDGs era, this is more challenging because we have to use more targeting approach because of the leaving no one behind principles. We have also the issue of impact washing. This is coming from the last June 2020 survey. More than 60% of the impact investors, they worry about the impact washing, which is when you make false claim about impact, you don't have real evidence and you say you are making impact. This is really a big issue in the impact investing community. And they say also there is an issue with when it comes to demonstrate the impact using credible methodology. Just to give you some example on the left side, students enrollment, we have it as the basic indicator to measure the impact on our education project. But we know in the SDGs era, this indicator is not, accurate. You can have very precise measure, but to be aligned with the SDGs, you have to go beyond the enrollment to talk about the quality of education. For example, in rural area in India, according to the study of JPAL, you have almost more than 50% of the students at grade 9 who cannot read the basic text of a student of grade 2. So there is an issue of the quality of education. How are we going to measure that in our evaluation? The second example I give is sometimes you can have very accurate measure, but that is not precise. The example of jobs. Now you can get easily the direct jobs, but if you want to calculate the indirect jobs or the induced jobs, you will struggle to get really very precise measure. In some examples that were discussed in our annual meeting, it was said that sometimes you may use some conversion methodology, which gives you final impact, a number of jobs that exceeds the total population of a given country. So this is an issue we have. We have the same issue to estimate the access to electricity. Next. We don't have only challenges, we have also opportunities that show us we can really address some of these challenges when we try to leverage on the capacity of the local companies. And this is really in line with the Paris Declaration on Aid Effectiveness, which emphasizes on ownership. This is aligned also with the SDGs, which were developed. Unlike the MDG, the previous one, it was really developed and owned by countries. We have also a lot of impact harmonized framework. These are some of, impact framework where we are involved. the MDB's additionality, the hypsometrics, and the iris metrics also. And we have lastly the impact investing community with GIN, the Global Impact Investing Network. We have also the recent impact principles led by IFC. Next. When we look at the impact intent scale, we can see on the extreme, the right extreme, we can see this nice example from JP Morgan. They say they launched a development finance institution, and this was done with the support of IFC. I think Isaac may talk more about this, but this is really a concrete example of how the private sector can take the lead in terms of development impact. So when we look at the impact scale, we can go from a pure commercial company to a pure DFI. In between, we can have the impact investing industries. Next. This brings me to comment on some of the example we have within the private sector arm of ICD, of the bank of IDB. How can we support company-led monitoring evaluation system? Next.
Ibrahima, I received a request to again speak louder, please.
Okay. So for this example, we started with Akhdar Bank, which is a bank owned by ICD in Morocco. So we start raising, this initiative, providing technical assistance to our client company in 2018. This is an example of Akhdar Bank. It was so easy because ICD is a shareholder, and it was written in the shareholder agreement that they need to develop an impact framework. So we provided them with this technical assistance that helping them have their impact objective using the methodology I have described and the 10 steps that will come later. And we were able to develop together their theory of change and their SDGs narrative. Next. This is the methodology we used together with the impact principles, which is the 10 steps for result-based monitoring evaluation system developed by Ray Rist and his colleague at the World Bank. It's very well known. Next. And the starting point for this is the readiness assessment. This gives you an idea whether your client company is ready to move in that direction. And it's really a reference in the journey to implement the impact framework. We question about the motivation, the champions, the data systems that are existing, whether they have proper allocation to results. We look at also the most challenging part is if they accept negative information. So if you just want to see positive information from your impact system, you are not really doing impact investing. If you want to do proper impact investing or evaluation, you should accept really negative information, because this is what can help you improve. We look at also the M&E capacity, but also how the result system is linked between the project, the program, and the corporate goals. Next. I will finish on the early lessons. It's a very recent experience. We have so far 3 lessons. Next, the first one is the different drivers to stimulate demand for impact. For our case, the first example was when the driver is coming from the DFI or the shareholder agreement. We have another example from Maldives Islamic Bank. When they were going to IPO, so to launch their IPO, that was their motivation to have this impact framework. One of the most advanced we have so far visited is the central banks with Malaysia Central Bank. Shukri may talk more about it. They have now this value-based intermediation with 9 local banks. So they receive, we receive technical assistance from some of these banks, and we have already delivered some of them. Finally, from the government, Sri Lanka's government has requested the banks to report on their contribution to SDGs. Amana Bank was interested and requested ICD to support them. Next. The second lesson is data is not enough. It's very important, but it's obvious, but really we have to focus on utilization. Sometimes, I mean, we may have more focus on data, but if you don't use it, or if you use only the positive side of the data, this will not help. So we need to develop evaluation culture that tolerates error and promotes the use of evidence and organization learning. The last lesson next is COVID. We cannot talk we cannot say anything without talking about COVID now. This shows us the relevance of having, more ownership, more local ownership, because field visit is very challenging now. And also we have the other side is more opportunities for making impact. For instance, according to the last June survey, 15% of impact investors, they say they are committed to have additional capital. Next. To sum up, as I said before, the main challenges faced by DFIs are reliability of the data or the evidence we get from our system. The second is the attribution of impact, and finally, building local ownership. Second, we have a lot of opportunities to push for this company-led M&E systems, starting from Paris Declaration on effectiveness, the 2013 agenda, and the impact networks. COVID-19 may be a new era to grow impact investing. And lastly, if you want to avoid impact washing, we should focus on the use of evaluation for a better future. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ibrahima. That's really insightful, and I think we will receive questions from the audience when it comes to the Q&A time. Now, let's move to the esteemed panelists, and I will start with Dr. Gökhan. I will ask you 2 questions, please, and we would like to limit the time to 5 to 7 minutes for both. So my first question to your good self is that KfW has a track record of ex-post evaluation of its private sector operations. What are the main lessons you would like to share in undertaking the evaluation of your private sector operations?
Okay, thank you very much, Mohammed. Before answering that question, and I will very briefly say something about what is it that we do in our evaluation unit. So, what is the evidence base on which I will try to answer the question. I guess that in the setting today, we will all have contribute very particular experience to the debate. So what we do, so clearly the development bank, we work with local institutions and partners, so we effectively finance their intervention, so that is evident. What is it that we do at the evaluation unit? So what we do is every year we draw a sample, a representative sample of all the interventions that were completed in the last year. We stratify this by sector so that it's representative for the bank's activities. And this is the sample of interventions that we evaluate. So we conduct these ex-post evaluations. It's a 50% sample of the completed projects. And we do that following the OECD DAC criteria. So when we judge the effectiveness and the efficiency and the impact, etc. So you're well aware of that procedure. So typically, in some singular instances, this may be a rigorous impact evaluation, but generally, it's the OECD DAC criteria following. Sometimes I call it like a data-supported, qualitative, subjective approach in a way. It's structured and systematic. And the good thing is we've been doing this for 20 years now. So there's a relatively large database of these impact evaluations, in-house impact evaluations available. And you could probably say, in a ways, connecting to a theme that Ibrahima mentioned in the presentation is, so whose impact is it? Or who is the person interested in the impact? Is it the donor, or is it the local partner? Is it the private sector company? So in many ways, I would think that our perspective of the evaluation unit at KfW Development Bank is that the private sector is indirectly involved. No? So we are the drivers behind the evaluation. And of course, there's partner involvement. I'll get back to that in the second part. But mainly we are the ones that demand the impact, or they want to look at this impact. So in preparation for the meeting today, I was curious to look at the database, and is there anything I can draw out of results that we would have on impact in the private sector entities. And since I mentioned that what we do is we structure it, we stratify it by sectors. So actually the large majority of interventions that we look at, that we have in the database when we talk private sector entities, are in the financial sector. And then what we can look at in the data at the lessons learned. And I just want to share with you some of the recurring themes that we saw across the evaluations that we have in the private sector evaluations. So the first result that we would find is that financing of the microfinance institutions improves access to finance for the target group. Where the target group typically would be individuals, bank customers, but mostly MSMEs. So we have a set of countries for which we have evidence for that: Nigeria, Pakistan, India, etc. So that will be one finding here. A second finding that we would have from our evaluations would be that the local partner institutions play a key role for the successful interventions, and that is particularly true in fragile contexts. So we have a couple of studies here from Syria, Afghanistan, Ukraine in the data. Now, I know sometimes when one lists these kind of overall results, they sometimes sound a bit, I think sometimes a bit like no-brainers. So this is clearly it's important, but I still find it very important to mention and find out that this is actually what we have in the data from the evaluations that we conduct. So they are successful generally. The local partners play a key role. The third finding is that refinancing processes, diversification procedures are important, as is the fourth, the intervention concept. So we look at how is the project designed? Are there multiple phases where we can learn one phase to the other? Is there a time lag between concept of the intervention and the implementation? And we have a set of studies, that's the last example I want to mention, where we find that there's still a scope for improving the establishing of responsible finance mechanism and responsible finance principles. So this is what I would want to share with you from what we have in our evaluation database. Like I said, I suspect that this will be a very particular perspective on the topic of the day. Mohammed, would you want me to connect that with the next question?
Yes, please. The next question is really about the impact evaluation and how can that, be linked or applied
Yes.
to the concept of the private sector.
Yeah, I think so. In some, my perspective is that so we have the experience mostly from the finance sector or the microfinance sector, and my perspective is that we transmit that to the private sector in a rather indirect way. So we're the ones who conduct the evaluations. Of course, we collaborate with them, right? So they provide the data, they provide the interviews. As each part of each ex post evaluation, we sit down, we discuss, we present the results, we discuss the results. So there's a lot of interaction and involvement. So they do learn about efficiency and impact. But like I said, my view on this, it's a kind of an indirect way. I mean, clearly everybody, we are aware that partner involvement is a key issue. So, and we know we want to improve, we want to further improve that. But I don't think in the current system, there's no direct encouragement to them to do that. The challenges that we face, Ibrahima mentioned them perfectly: baseline data, reliability of data in general, attribution, etc. And I think actually moving forward, there's one thing I thought that might be really important is, so if you think about how can private sector entities, so we often think about how can they do their IEs better, how can we assist them, why should they do it? And I think one potential lever might be to think more about what are the precise ways in which the results can be made usable for them? To actually come from this end part is how can we use them so that they are of value to learn and to improve their future activities. And I think that might be a very important lever for stimulating the demand for impact, as Ibrahima mentioned it in the presentation. And I'll probably leave it at that, and we'll be happy to discuss more.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'll move now to ask Mr. Ahmed Shukri again a couple of questions. The first one would be actually that, as you know, Malaysia applied the value-based intermediation, the VBI. Would you please tell us more about it from your experience, Mr. Ahmed?
Okay, thank you, Mohammed. Okay, basically, value-based intermediation is a Central Bank of Malaysia initiative. It started, I think, about 4 years ago, and with some early discussion. And in 2018, the Central Bank have come up with guidance notes on this value-based intermediation. So basically, value-based intermediation is a focus to delivering outcomes of Islamic banking, Sharia, Sharia, through practices, conduct, and offerings that will generate positive and sustainable impact to the economy, community, and environment. But at the same time, consistent with the shareholders' returns and long-term interests. So we try to balance the expectation of profitability, at the same time provide the sustainable impact to the economy and the community environment. So basically, the program is for starts involve about 9 Islamic banks in Malaysia, and it will focus to cover this following benefits. First, foremost, from the regulator perspective, they were focused to ensuring the financial stability and resilience from this bank value-based intermediation. So we will have a more stable approach in terms of asset quality management and the growth of the market itself. Another beneficiary from this value-based intermediation is obviously the communities. We are getting the community involved in a productive manner, so that through financing, it will be can also create a multiplier effects to the economics and the community as itself. And on a customer basis, one of the components from this customer basis is actually why we going for non-debt-based financing, to focus more toward the what we call equity-based activities. So there will be more profit-sharing approach compared to the normal debt-based financing. In terms of the financial industry itself, also is giving innovation. We are go beyond the normal debt, like I mentioned, beyond the debt-based through this musyarakah approach, so that at the end of the day, the growth of the business is actually being nurtured rather than just looking from the debt-based situation. And of course, government will really have a great benefit in terms of providing, ensuring a financial stability, ensuring a growth of the financial institution, growth of the Islamic banking, and also the society as a whole. They be able to, for example, grow what we have. One of the industry that the government looking at is, for example, halal industry. So from this value-based intermediation, we adopt and put under the whole ecosystem will actually fully benefit this government initiative.
So I think you mentioned some of the opportunity. Actually, it was my part of my second question, Mr. Ahmed. So Can you please elaborate more about some of the opportunities and actually also the challenges that you may face in following the value-based intermediation to assess the impact on the private sector context? In 2 minutes, please.
First and foremost, one of the areas when we talk about environment, there is on the issues of renewable energies. So there is opportunity for us to grow the renewable energies through solar business and this thing. So that's from our banking perspective, we work together with our energy provider, and we finance the companies that do solar farms. So this approach is a comprehensive ecosystem. As a financial, we work together with the solar farm providers, and we work with our energy national energy corporation to create ecosystem as a renewable energy source to the countries. Our in this approach, at the end of the day, because this is actually a long-term approach. If you look from just normal financing perspective, you probably the gestation period or the thing would not be so feasible. But when we look from environmental perspective, a combination of this will actually provide the opportunity to fulfill this gap in the financing requirement. So that's one area that we do. And maybe if I can add, Muhammad, we do also another one is on growing the cooperative. The cooperative in, because Bank Rakyat, one of the mandate is to assist the cooperative growth in the Malaysia. So we support the cooperative for their business opportunities, and at the end of the day, will benefit the members through nurturing them, doing them, for example, they're doing what we are doing now, looking at halal industries, halal food. So we nurture them from the, giving the finance from the start they want to do, then grow them to be an export oriented. So we measure them in terms of not only profitability, but we measure them in terms of the benefit of the ummah itself. That's basically how it will help you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Mr. Nathan, the segmentation of the Asian Development Bank contains, public and private sector both in its operation. So what are some of the main characteristics for the evaluation of private sector operations compared to public sector?
Thank you, Mohammed. Let me first start by, just giving everybody a little bit of an overview in terms of how ADB is organized, right? ADB has both the public and the private sector operations under the same umbrella, unlike in the World Bank where they have a separate arm for the private sector, i.e. the IFC, and then there is the World Bank group to support the sovereign side. So there are advantages and disadvantages to have everything under the same umbrella. On the public side, ADB does a lot of infrastructure financing. It also does support for policy regulatory reforms, and it also does some support for results-based lending. On the private side, ADB's business can be broadly separated into two parts. One is infrastructure financing, and the other is for lending through financial intermediaries. This is similar to what Johan was talking about, right? So in terms of the size of our lending, on the public side, it's about 90%. On the private side, it's about 10%. So on a yearly basis, ADB lends about $20 billion, of which about 2.5 to 3 billion is on the private side in terms of committed amounts, and about $17 billion is on the public side. So now with that background and context, I want to also now talk about why should the approach for private sector evaluation be different for public sector versus the public sector evaluation, right? Because this is a hot topic now, even among MDBs, because there are some MDBs that are now thinking of adopting the same OECD DAC criteria for evaluating both public and private sector. Whereas we at ADB feel there has to be a differentiated, a more nuanced approach to look at private sector. And I'll tell you why. First, before I do that, I want to explain what is it that makes the private sector different, right? Private sector, we are supporting a private sector entity, right? The profitability is one of the key concerns in this enterprise that we are doing. There is competition that is involved, right? And these are commercially viable concerns, right? And when we engage with private sector, the credit risk that ADB or any other MDB or any IFI takes is important because you could end up losing your money in this transaction. Whereas compare this to the public side, the transactions are very chunky, meaning they're bigger size transactions. These are either to support, a much broader initiative, such as to create the right policy or the enabling environment, or to support critical infrastructure, right, that otherwise cannot be funded. Critical infrastructure such as metros, water supply, and so on, those are not always financially viable, but needs to be done because there is an overall public good to doing this. And so MDBs and IFIs get involved to help the government in terms of providing budget support to these public transactions, which are very much needed. But the emphasis there is not on profitability, but is on creating economic outcomes, right? So there is a clear difference between engaging on the private sector side and engaging on the public side. The counterpart on the private side is an entity, right? A small private sector entity. Whereas on the public side, you are taking a sovereign risk. Your counterpart there is a government agency, either at the state level or at the federal level, right? And the other tricky part that many MDBs, including ADB, faces is ADB is sourcing capital from the public markets. And on the public side, ADB provides money at subsidized levels, right? It's off-market transactions. And on the private side, ADB supposedly is providing money on equal terms with the rest of the market, which is you cannot displace the market. If you displace the market, because you're sourcing money from the public side, and if you're going to fund private transactions and you displace the market, that's not the right thing to do because you will take away the competition in the market. So ADB tries to do market-based transactions on the private side. And so that arrangement has to be very carefully managed because you don't want to overstep there. You want to do transactions that otherwise private sector won't get involved in, and you want to do catalytic demonstrative transactions, and you want to do transactions that are highly mobilizing on the private side, right? So with that, hopefully everybody has a clear understanding on what brings about this different approach to engaging with private sector versus public sector, and why is there a need to evaluate them differently? Because the object of the evaluation, as I've explained so far, is different when you look at a private side versus a public side. So now, lastly, briefly, I'll touch upon some of the key characteristics of a private sector evaluation, right? We want to really emphasize the private sector development contribution aspects in a private sector evaluation. In that, you want to look at catalytic demonstration elements in that support. You want to look at mobilization elements. You want to look at upstream, downstream linkage as a result of improvements and as a result of that support. And you want to look at additionality both financial and non-financial, right? That the institutions such as ADB brings to the table, right? Which is, what are some of the inputs and services that ADB provides that really result in development outcomes? And another key element on the private sector evaluation, which is not there on the public sector evaluation when you follow the OECD DAC criteria, is investment profitability. And so you have a dual mandate on the private side, whereas on the public side, it's a singular mandate, which is development outcomes. On the private side, you have development outcomes and profitability. So I think that is a key distinction. And so on the public side, we follow the OECD DAC criteria, which is relevance, effectiveness, efficiency, and sustainability. Whereas on the private side, we have a more nuanced, differentiated private sector criteria for evaluating projects that incorporates various elements that I was talking about, right? That brings in all these elements of additionality, work quality, profitability, and business success of the entity that we are supporting. Because if the business success of the entity is not good, if the entity that ADB or any of the IFIs support is not good, then the development outcomes are not going to be there, because the development outcomes are heavily reliant on catalytic demonstration effects. And if the company fails, then there is no development outcomes. So that's why it is very different, and it needs to be treated in a more nuanced way. And the last point I want to say here is investment profitability is very important, not only for the community and the developing countries that ADB supports on the private sector side, but it's important for ADB itself and for the IFIs itself, because part of the money that ADB has as equity in its balance sheet is set aside to do private sector support. And if ADB were to run that operation in a way where it doesn't sustain itself, wherein the profitability is loss-making, then ADB won't be able to do private sector support. So that's very important to keep in mind. Yeah, back to you, Mohammed.
Well, we have less than a minute or two to ask you the second question, but also maybe Dr. Isa during his time can elaborate more on that. But regarding the impact investing, as you know, it's an emerging area of great importance to the private sector operations and developing economics, actually. So in your opinion, Nathan, why do you think it hasn't, had the big uptake it should have so far? In 2 minutes, please.
Yeah, sure. I would say 3 reasons, right? The first reason is, the impact investment definition is not standardized and is not well understood. Okay, there's a lack of clarity in terms of what constitutes an impact investment. A number of private sector players, right, who are very conscious of the social environmental effects, want to contribute, but they don't understand impact definition really well. And so they get scared by this definition. They don't know which one would qualify as an impact investment, which one will not. So there is an onus amongst us to make sure that not only is the definition clear and standardized, but then this is communicated widely and clearly to everybody, right? And there is also a little bit of confusion, because a lot of the market thinks performance-based payments, i.e. impact bonds, is impact investments. But that is one small subsector of impact investments, right? And that also needs to be clarified, because if you really want to have private sector engaging in impact investments, they need to understand that they can make profit in this. It's not just something where grant money is used for performance-based payments. The second reason why there is not good uptake of impact investments is got to do with the design and the measurement of impacts and the validation by an independent entity, right? So as you can see, designing impact investments is very, very complicated, right? You need to bring together a partnership of borrowers, the key stakeholders in terms of the project developers, and the MDBs and the international financial institutions to help come up with a robust results framework. So all these parties need to come together to design an impact framework really well, so that data for this can be easily collected and can be reported on, right? And while you're reporting on data, it is also important that there is independent verification of this data, because these data, when they meet certain thresholds for impact investments, payments have to be made. And so the market needs to be certain that these are independently verified and can be relied on. So independent verification of this data is very, very important alongside the design. The third reason, and the most important reason why impact investments haven't taken hold, is because of the incentive structure, right? For impact investments to take hold, the incentive structure should be such all the key players in this investment have skin in the game, and they all have to participate on the upside, right? And there are many examples that can be given whereby you can set up an incentive structure so that there is a win-win-win scenario. But this will involve, a very careful look in terms of making sure the enabling environment for that structure exists. Everybody understands the design of the structure, and that data can be collected and reported on. But I want to say that the prospects are pretty good, because even situations like improving livelihood of farmers, on which you don't get to see a lot of income, but these can be easily structured as impact investments, whereby the incentive structure is very well aligned among all stakeholders. I'll stop there. Thank you so much. Back to you, Mohammed.
Thank you very much. Interesting. Dr. Isa, I would ask you to build upon this last point of Nathan regarding the impact investing, but also I would like to ask you about this collaboration that happened between IFC and JP Morgan in the creation of the JP Morgan Development Financial Institution. So what you would tell us about this collaboration and what this will add to the market of the DFIs?
All right, thank you, Mohammed. Thank you for having me. Before I get to that, if you allow me, I'll just say a couple of minutes discussing a little bit about the IHC Development Impact System and where we are at now. And as you know, since the Addis Declaration in 2015, we all know that there have been a paradigm shift in financing for development. And IFC has been really at the forefront of that, because we realized from that moment, and even before that, that we need to catalyze, we need to mobilize, we need to move from billions to trillions. So the landscape is changing, and it has been changing very rapidly. IFC and other DFIs are not the only game in town, because all the private institutions, banks, and all that are doing exactly the same thing that we do. So what can we do differently? And we started reflecting as we are developing our IFC 3.0 strategy, which is, okay, how do we really embrace these new changes in the financing for development world? Because we're not the only game in town. We need to capitalize. We need to go from billions to trillions. And there is a need to really build on our double bottom line. As Nathan was saying, we have a double bottom line. We have the financial return and development impact. So how can we make sure that we have that balancing act as we go forward and push for financing for development? And this is where the idea to put in place a system that is structured and which helps systematically assess impact, not only ex ante but ex post. We have what we call an end-to-end system. The AM system is an end-to-end from ex ante to ex post, including the monitoring and implementation, which is very key if you want to have a robust system in place. And the system is looking at two different dimensions. One dimension is the project outcomes that we call about stakeholder analysis, looking at beneficiaries, and then trying to see how we push for some incremental impact. But the most important thing is what we call this market creation impact, which is really about catalyzing. How are we going to make sure that we have systemic impact from our project, going beyond the just incremental effect on stakeholders? How can we move markets? Because that's what we are in. If we want to really make the SDGs, moving from billion to trillion, you need really more than just moving some number of jobs here and there, but just moving market as a whole. So this is where we are, and this is what the system is trying to do. And coming back to some of your reflection on some of the presentation of Ibrahim, well done, Ibrahim, by the way, on the data issue. And then this is where the data is very important. Ibrahim, I would say that data is important. I agree with you that we should not over-rely on only data and data, but data is important for us to make a judgment, because at the end of the day, what we do is not a science. It's more an art than a science. That's how I defined it. This all impact assessment is really about using your judgment and your economic analysis to make a point. I think that's what I would say. On attribution versus contribution, I totally agree with you that we have that issue, that the way we're looking at it at IC is that we are about contribution, because we are looking at moving market. We're looking at really contributing and being catalytic. We cannot just go there and try to attribute every dollar to what IC is doing. We're trying to see how IC can contribute with KFW, ISDB, and others to make things change. So that's what the contribution, how we see the contribution element. And then coming back to your question, Mohammed, and which is to me not a challenge that Ibrahim put it as a challenge, but it can be also turned and flipped and be seen as an opportunity, is the impact washing and all these issues that we have around impact investing. And that will bring me to the principles. And there I totally agree with Nathan that, look, I mean, what is happening is that there is hope in the air, actually. I really see that there is hope in the air in terms of this issue of impact investing. We're seeing really day by day, from where I see it, I see a lot of demand and a lot of of momentum. There is the impact principle, impact measurement has seen really momentum. The market is really booming. And there are several initiatives going on. The JP Morgan is one, and there are several others that we can name because I've been discussing with them on a daily basis. And that gives me hope that things are coming up. And then people are serious about it because what you want is not just people saying, oh, we have a new DFIs, we're setting up a new impact investing and all that, but are we really serious about it? And this is why the impact principle that IC has tried to push together are very, very helpful. The 9 principles that Ibrahima mentioned. And then if you look at those 9 principles, I'm not going to go through all of them, but just a couple of them which are linked to accountability, the ones that are linked to disclosure of results, because it's not only about being able to do the evaluation and self-evaluation and get the data, but this data need to be reported back. We need to see those data to make sure that we are accountable. I mean, those who are praising themselves for being impact investors should be able to report and then be held accountable on what they do. And the fact that these data also are audited by independent is something that really gives me hope. So I think that we are putting the basis together, the principles are there, and now we have accounted around 100 signatories from investors, private investors, and DFIs and others. So there is really a movement going there. So what we have done as IFC, and then from our experience of AIM, we are trying to support that movement. We are trying to make sure that we can avoid this impact investing. How? There are different work initiatives that we have been involved over the last couple of years. And as you have seen, there is a lot of, there is a need to really coordinate and harmonize here because there are several initiatives. There is this IBC initiative with the World Economic Forum. We've seen that there are GRI, SSSB, everybody's now starting to put together indicators and standards. So there is some discipline that need to be put into place. And then IFC and others are trying to work into that. As you would know, there is an impact management project that IFC is working with, including GRI, IRIS, but also including many of you guys, DFIs we have, the Proparco, CDC, and also many other members of the HIPSO who are part of that group will say, okay, how can we now leverage the work that has been done on the HIPSO, which is the harmonized indicator for private sector operations, which has been in place, I mean, over the last 11 years, but now we want to go to the next level. How can we leverage that initiative to make sure that we can put the basis for impact investing? And in this context that the JP Morgan came to us like last year, and they say, okay, guys, we are serious about it, and we would like to really put in place a system to manage and measure impact. At the beginning, to be frank, I mean, people were saying, okay, JP Morgan, I mean, are we really sure? Are they really sure they want to do this? I mean, there was some skepticism internally, and then when they came and said that. But we saw what we did actually is that, okay, we just open our books, we present to them all our system from A to Z, and then try to work with them. And they put together a team. And that team goes in my offices every single week for like 3 to 4 months. And I've dedicated a team taking them through all the different bits and pieces on how to measure what the system looks like, how do you get impact, what are the indicators, how do you do these things from ex ante to ex post, really going into detail in our system. And then we help them customize, because as I always do, I mean, the IC system may not work for any other institution. It may not work for KFWA, it may not work for ISDB, but you can use the principles and the basics, and it works for you to customize it in such a way that it works for your objectives. And that's what we work with them. We try to help them, okay, what is your need? What are you trying to do? And then what would be the different indicators and metrics that you would need to use? And then, as you know, in IC, we use this concept of gaps and intensity to try to measure impact. For us, it's not only about the incremental effect, the context matters. Where are you? How acute is your problem? And how you do move the needle? So we help them really use those principles to come about with a system that they have now, which is very much, it looks like the IC one, but really customized for DSC. And we're very proud to be part of that experience, really. And actually, they're very serious about it because we have every month a check-in meeting. I had a meeting last month with them where they have assessed, they appraised their first project, for example, through the new system. So there is really a hope there that impact washing will not be there. And what gives me more hope is that not only JP Morgan, but I don't want to mention names. There are other impact investors who are currently working with us. Last week, my team has been having a meeting, a similar kind of meeting with them. And in February, March, we have hosted 4 DFIs like Proparco, EBRD, CDC. They came and sit for us for a week, where we had to work with them and try to see, really going about through all those different principles that we have and system, and how do you make your system work. And I think that this is getting a momentum. It's really something. Yes.
Let me ask you a question here.
Yes, Mohammed, go ahead.
I appreciate if we have like 2 minutes for this question, but it's really to build on this, tremendous, partnership and collaboration that you are doing. Specifically for the AIM system, was this, if I use the word borrowed by any other institution to be tested and applied in their, context? And if you can tell us about it.
I mean, I hope my colleagues who are from those institutions will forgive me, but yes, there's a lot that we're doing now. But I think that we're positioning it as a public good. For us, we just sharing. It's about really working together because we have the same shareholders, we have same kind of objectives. So we are comparing notes and then sharing with others. And when I mentioned, for example, those institutions who came and sat with us, there are a couple of two of them wanted now to adopt the AIM system. I don't want to mention names because they're in the process of doing, and I don't know what they will end up doing. But we are actually doing that actually. And then, for example, I just mentioned, let me mention CDC. For CDC has borrowed all our sector frameworks because, as you know, we don't only have the system, but we have for every single sectors, from mining, power, SMEs to you name them, we have very specific kind of frameworks that give us the law of the land and how do you assess project. So they're borrowing every single of those frameworks to try to build their own system that they're doing now. Actually, their deadline is maybe October to get a new system. So just to give you an example that is happening real time, and then many institutions are coming, and there is even the Saudi National Development Fund. We got I met with them 2 weeks ago to start something similar to that. So yes, there is a lot of work that we're doing. We're sharing a lot. We're trying to help whoever wants to come. And then we're also trying to learn from others. For example, one of the things that we try to do is to make sure that when we talk about this benchmarking of intensity, we try to get data also from other partners, because what we have now is the data that we have built in our own system from our own portfolio, which for me is not sufficient, because you're gonna be benchmarking your project with your stuff. It will be good to open up that database, get more information from DFIs and other private institutions so that we can see something that is really better. So excellent. Yes, your answer is yes, Mohammed. There's a lot going on now, a lot, even too many things. And even sometimes I say, okay, I mean, what is happening there? I mean, everything is being adopted, and then we need maybe to put some kind of structure and discipline on how do we do that collectively. Maybe something to think about in the next coming months.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Teresa. Now, I have a question to everyone, and I have my notes. I would like really to come back to all of you, including Mr. Ibrahima. But I have a question here, and I will just ask anyone who would like to jump in and answer from one of the audience. He's asking about ESG and the impact investing. So how can we apply, or how can we put the environmental, social, and corporate governance in line with the impact investing. So anyone would like to take that?
Can I go? Hello.
Yes, please.
Yes, for here, I think I will go back to the concept as Nathan mentioned. I think it's a matter of definition. Usually when we talk about ESG, we are looking at the negative impact and how can we mitigate that impact. And when you go, look at the concept of impact investing, you look at the positive effect you can make on environment and the society. It is linked also to the different definition you have on impact. Today, if you ask someone, what is the definition of impact? You may have three different definitions. The first definition of impact is the long-term effect you have, which is consistent with what we have with the OECD criteria. This is the first definition. The second definition of impact is the change you can attribute to your intervention, meaning the positive change, which is more consistent with the impact investing approach. And the last definition, which is more consistent with the ESG, is what are the negative effect on environment and the society, and how are you going to mitigate this impact? So I will say you can use the ESG in an impact investing framework, but you just need to turn it. The impact investing will look at more the positive effect, and the ESG will look at how to turn the negative effect, how to mitigate them and address them in your intervention. Thank you.
Mohammed, if you, I can comment on that as well, you know, just a quick intervention, right, on ESG and whether or not it's impact investing. See, I see a lot of parallel between ESG, tracking it, and if you compare it to credit, right? When we make investments in the real world, you have credit rating, and there are Moody's and S&P and Fitch that provide these ratings. There is a specific criteria that need to be met to qualify to be a AA or a AAA and so on. And these ratings are monitored through the life of the project. And I think where it's going to end up in the next 10 years is there is going to be a rating for ESG that companies can apply for and get it. And there will be independent providers out there that can provide this ESG rating based on a fixed standardized criteria. And this will be monitored, I think.
Nathan, isn't it there already? I know that I think S&P, they already started to evaluate entities based on the ESG.
Correct,
already.
But I don't, it hasn't taken off really, right? Because many companies haven't really adopted it to say my ESG criteria rating is this. Whereas any company, you can go in and see what is your Moody's rating? What is your S&P rating? And it changes as they monitor it, right? So I think it is going to be in the future where once these standards are all, you know, definition is all standardized, and then there is a clear framework, and all this data is not only tracked, but is made transparent and is made available to everybody. I think the ESG rating is going to take hold and will change impact investing, I think, in the future. And I'll make one more point, right? This is a broad point in terms of impact investing. Because impact investing doesn't have to be something that compromises on profit. You know, one thing that we did here in ADB, right, we looked at some 100 odd evaluated projects, and we looked to see, okay, put investment profitability on the y-axis, development outcomes on the x-axis. We try to see what is the correlation. And it's more than 75% correlation where you have high investment profits, you have high development outcomes as well. And the same can be said for IFC evaluated projects as well. So one doesn't have to come at the expense of other. You can easily structure transactions where you have both investment outcomes, impact, and good profitability. So I just want to mention that because that will also help in the uptake of impact investments.
Mohammed, can I add, Mohammed?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Okay, I'm coming from the angle of risk management because we always come from a credit assessment or whatnot. And when involved impact investment, we risk assessment now involve more beyond that, saying that we can look at the customer whether they are actually having what kind of labor approach they do, whether they use force labor or not, what kind of energy usage they are used. So these are the areas of addition that when we do impact investment, we will be looking into it. Of course, this is something still in the preliminary, not many bank FI are willing to do this because the companies that we are financing also not ready to meet this. But this is something we are moving forwards to that. So this is the area just to share from a risk management perspective.
Thank you very much. Isa, you are muted.
Yes, Mohammed, just wanted to comment, just a footnote on what colleagues have said on the ESG. Just to say that in AIM, for example, we have started already taking into account the indicator on ESG in our development impact assessment system. And this is going to be part of our rating system going forward. And we are really strengthening our toolkit to make sure that we can measure that, not only on the project outcome side, but also on the market side. This brings the issue of sustainability. How do you capture sustainability? What sustainability means in a market, and how will you, how are we going to measure those? And I must confess that one of the most difficult part on the AIM assessment is the market side, because how do you collect data? That's this is my nightmare now going forward. This new year, this is where I'm going to focus a lot in trying to see how we can build the data to try to see how we move market and sustain in a sustainable way. And just a comment on Ibrahim, what you say on that impact investing will focus on the positive. I think that I would just caution about that, because that will go into a little bit onto this impact washing. I think that the ESGs will come with both sides. And then we need to recognize in even our own impact systems that there's these two sides of it. It's the positive and negatives. Because what we see most of the time at the DFIs, we just report on the positives. But I think that we are overlooking one part of the issue, which is the negatives that some of our projects can have. And this is something that we are trying internally in IFC to make sure that we can correct, because we believe that there are going to be the two sides of the coins in some of these projects, and we need to be transparent about it. There are going to be some positive, but also some negative that we need. And I would really recommend that we all think about that as we go into this impact investing, that also people recognize both sides of the coin and not be schizophrenic on what they can report and share.
Sure. Yeah, that's very good. KfW applied a very good system that I really liked, and I would be happy to see it, even enhanced further to be not complicated but complex to be comprehensive, which is the SDG mapping. So I would appreciate if you, Dr. Johan, maybe tell us a bit about the SDG mapping of the KfW interventions.
Well, so very briefly, the SDG mapping that our bank has developed. I mean, the basic idea is to see how do our activities contribute to achieving the SDGs. Well, so it's a very aggregate bird's eye view on this issue. I'll give a very brief explanation of this. I'll be happy to share with a nice methodological paper that explains this. It's not too methodological, so it's easily accessible. Well, in principle, the starting point is, so we have two ways in which we can address the SDGs. One is by financing directly sustainable customer and partner activities, for instance, a wind farm for energy transition, or by supporting the customer towards a more sustainable business management. And what we then do is we put this into a stylized impact chain for sustainable development. And we start from our input to partner activity, to partner output, societal outcome, and sustainable development. And that we try to feed with a whole database of indicators. I think there's, the colleagues collected about 1,500 types of indicators that feeds into this. And the basis is that each activity that we do in different sectors is judged by whether it's SDG eligible. And for that, that's set out in the paper. There's a reference framework that tells us, following the 2030 agenda and the German sustainability agenda and other documents, that says if a specific activity is SDG eligible, then we feed the data from the indicators to this. And in the end, that's the aggregate view, you get this really nice graph that shows in the circle of the SDGs, very colorful, which are where our commitments go and where they are expected to have the largest impact on achieving the SDGs. So for instance, that's in the paper, and it's easily to find on the website. For instance, the biggest currently are towards climate action, affordable clean energy, and sustainable cities and communities. It's definitely worth a read. Now it's very, very short to explain this, but
thank you very much, John.
Do have a look. Thank you.
I have a question to Isa. Two questions actually. The first one is, Isa, how do you guard against greenwashing and ESG or impact investing? And another question from the same person, I think Hamid Sharif. Could you refer to any materials on IFC experience with impact investing? These two questions for Isa. You are again muted.
Thank you, Mohammed. So I think that for the, in terms of the material for impact investing, I would say that I would recommend that people look at the principle. There is a report on impact principle that was done when we were setting up the impact principle initiative. I think that would be very handy for those who have not have a background on where we was a couple of years back and how do we set all those principles together. And then there is a new report coming out for the first year after these signatories. And this first year will just give you a sense of all what has happened since then. And then we have there a couple of illustrations of impact investors and what they have been doing since then. I think that if you don't have it, Ahmed, I will try to find some of those or share it with Mohammed so that you can see what IC has been doing since then. And another thing that we are trying to do, and I mentioned earlier that we are trying to work under the IPSO framework. IPSO is this harmonized indicator for private sector, where all of you guys are members. I think the Asian Development Bank, Islamic Development Bank, and other DFIs are all members of that. And we're working currently with IRIS, the IRIS Plus metrics, to get to some set of harmonized indicators that we're going to be used for the impact investing. And there is going to be a position paper on setting up really this new metrics for impact investing that will going to come soon. So there is a lot of work going on now that we will be sharing as we go forward. And on top of that, we have a plan, a roadmap under the steering committee of the impact management project, where we want to really work with different institutions. And the goal is to have a selective consensus around impact assessment for impact investing. What would an impact assessment for impact investing looks like? And this will touch on all the questions and the point that Nathan mentioned about what would be the different dimensions, the indicators, the benchmark, and then the principle that you could use. What is impact investing and how can we measure that? So that is where we're going over the next couple of months on trying really to help put some of these standards in place. In terms of analysis, yes, I think that, okay, Mohammed, go back to you. No, that's fine. That's okay. I'm mindful of time as well. Go back to you.
So no, it's actually you already answered the question of Kate, which she was asking, can we use any other metrics or indicators beside OECD? And you just mentioned HIPSO, IRIS, yes. Jane. All these can be really a replacement of OECD. We also have DAC. So yes, of course we have many. She mentioned specifically about climate intervention and health, and of course we have it under the HIPSO, under yes. the sector indicators. We have 5 minutes before we conclude, and I still have one more question from Talal, and I would like maybe Nathan to answer that one, is how can we convince private sector partners on the merit of evaluation efforts? In 1 minute, Nathan, please.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Mohammed. I think, like I said before, right, the evaluation not only points out and verifies the development impact on the ground, but then it is also highly correlated to investment outcomes. So what we tell our private sector counterparts is, think of it, if you're going to go into a market where there is not a lot of private sector participation, and you are the first player there, not only is your development outcome going to be very high because no other player is there, but then you can have a very good return for the high level of risk that you're taking. So your investment return is also going to be high because there is no market, no price transparency there in that market. So you can charge a lot and you can open out a new market and you can ride that market for a long period of time. So I think this is a completely new area that is not only applicable for MDBs and ADBs and other IFIs, but I think it's applicable for the commercial players as well, because as they venture into new markets, new sectors that are not served by private sector well enough, I think they can go in with these development principles and proper design of results framework and demonstrate development outcomes, and while at the
I think we lost Nathan, maybe. Can you hear me, gentlemen? Yes, if he...
Yes,
okay.
I can.
Okay, until he comes back, hopefully he will be able to join back. I would like to make the conclusion. What we have one more question to IFC, but let me just say some of the conclusion that they have. I'll start with the very valid point in Ibrahima's presentation. It's really full of I would say points that need further sessions. We are talking about contribution versus attribution, which Isa elaborates on, but also you bring out this dilemma. I would say there is no enough data, but also we have too much data sometimes. Like in the example of KfW, and I'm sure even IFC and ADB, they have bank of data. So how can we really bring the gap between no enough data and the utilization of what we have? And this is, I mean, it's a very important subject. Also, we have the impact investing, you know, big question. From my side, it's really a question of, can we consider what the DFI is doing? Because their mandate as a development financial institutions is actually to invest, okay, in the development as a mandate. So can we consider what those DFIs doing is actually impact investing without even going to the definition of what does impact investing mean? So I'm just thinking loud here. We also have this very good you know, exercise from Rakyat, Malaysia, from which mentioned by brother Mr. Ahmad Shukri, about, you know, strengthening the communities and actually going to the cooperatives and try to enhance their interventions and impact on the community. So these are some of the points that I really would like to maybe keep the dialogue going in different occasions, especially about the impact investing. You know, standardize the definition and maybe have subsectors, you know, definition for the impact investing sometimes. But aren't really what we are doing is impact investing is my main big question here. In terms of enabling the private sector, we received very good examples through via Ibrahima's presentation on how the Islamic Development Bank Group really enable and support private sector to do their own evaluation. The examples from Dr. Isa regarding the many, you know, requests they receive to build or enhance their system is a very good example of how can private sector really be enabled to do their own evaluation. So in conclusion, I don't want to miss this question actually from this gentleman. How do you make the ECG impact is positive for a private sector like coal-fired energy project? That was for IFC and Asian Development Bank. But I would say my answer to this one, we don't need to make it positive. Okay, ECG is you know, is there. We just need to make sure that, I would say, that we have the ex-ante assessment that will clearly show us what is the impact on the ESG, positive and negative. And if there is a negative impact, how can we either control or minimize? But we are not trying to make it positive or make it looks positive. That's my maybe response to this. We lost you, Nathan. So
yeah, I'm sorry. My internet connection got interrupted. So I got the message through. I think that's all I wanted to say on that question. On this, positive impact for ESG. We just completed our energy evaluation now, the sector-wide evaluation of ADB over the last 10 years. It's on the website, so you can look at it. But one of the recommendations of that report is ADB should stay away from supporting coal-fired power plants. So that was one of our recommendations. But we said for Asia, where India and China are still investing in a lot of coal-fired power plants, we said ADB could still get engaged in by retrofitting them, by converting them to gas, or to help decommission these plants. So you can still have a positive impact with these old coal-fired power plants, and then also to fit them up with pollution control devices so that at least the harmful pollutants from these power plants can be controlled. So those were some of the messages that we had put out as part of that report. So maybe some examples of how we can still be beneficial with ESG.
Thank you very much. Gentlemen, we are really out of time, and I have just to say thank you very much for your time, for your really fruitful engagement and discussion. Thank you, Ibrahima, Johan, Ahmad, Isa, and Nathan. Thank you very much. I also would like to thank especially the organizers at the ADB, the gentlemen who are behind the scene currently helping us in all the technical aspects of this session. And thank you for the audience. Thank you for enriching the session by your questions and attendance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Muhammad. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thanks. Bye-bye.